I don't know how anyone could work in the field of special education and not believe in miracles. What I want to talk to you today about might be considered a tiny miracle in comparison to transfiguration or perhaps the recovery for someone from, a terminal illness and they recover. However, with my teaching partner and me, it was a big enough thing to still be remembered after these 45 years. To quote, and get ready for this one, to quote John Bon Jovi, yeah, I do mean John Bon Jovi. Well, it was such a good quote. Miracles can happen every day. Change your perception of what a miracle is, and you'll see them all around you. Not bad for John Bon Jovi, you know? Okay, over my more than 55 years of teaching in one form or another, I've written down nearly a dozen funny and touching stories, which I shared with my college students when I was teaching in my education courses. I'd intended to publish them in a book, but my students always said to me, these are not meant to be read, they're meant to be listened to. And so this is one of the ones that my kids always wanted me to do, was Judy and the Prom Dress, and you'll see why. And for me, it's just one of those tiny miracles that have occurred during my career working with special needs students or training students to be special ed teachers. My undergraduate degree is in secondary education in the areas of history and sociology. This was the 60s, remember. Unfortunately, when I graduated, most jobs in that area at the secondary level, which is where I wanted to teach, were given to football coaches. Almost every history teacher was a football coach. I offered at one school to be the coach because I love football, but it didn't work. Okay. The only question was, well, what would you do about the locker room? And I thought, isn't that a dumb question? All right. Anyway, at this time, middle school teachers didn't need to be certified. They do now. And so a lot of us took jobs in middle schools and waiting to get a school at the secondary, a class at the secondary level. But I never did end up teaching at the high school level because I fell in love with middle school kids. I adore them, they're crazy. Western Michigan University at the time was the leading school in the state, really, in special education. So I decided I'd take this class on Introduction to Mental Retardation in Grand Rapids, because I was working in Grand Rapids at the time in a night class. It was perfect timing. The new special education law, this was in the 60s, had just been passed. On the last week of class, after our final exam, my professor was handing back papers. When I received mine, he'd written across it, "See me after class." Oh, I didn't know whether to smile or worry. After class, he offered me a full-ride scholarship to the master's degree program at Western, and I left my job and moved to Kalamazoo to pursue a triple master's in special ed. And my entire life changed forever, because I was a general ed teacher before that. Perhaps maybe another tiny miracle? No. But let me get back to Judy and the Prom Dress. I had done a great deal of work in Benton Harbor School District during my coursework at WMU. And so upon completing my degree, I applied for a position there and got it. It was a totally new program at the 7th and 8th grade center, where we were going to try placing all the kids with different disabilities together in one classroom. Absolutely unheard of back then, not so rare now. The director of special education, who we referred to as Crazy Leonard, he was a wonderful administrator, decided that he would hire a second person and hired this young, newly graduated undergrad young woman, and her name was Kathy. And she was tall, slender, very quiet. Exactly the opposite of me. But remember, this was Leonard, and I'm blessed Leonard because it worked out very well. Kathy and I are still friends today after all these years. I've retired now, but she is a director of special ed down in the Benton Harbor area. In this new program, we were required to make a visit to each of the students' homes to meet the parents or guardian of the student. So we would know these kids when they came into class a little bit. I went to Judy's grandmother's home because Grandma was her guardian. She had been removed from her mom's home because Mom had a few problems. So Grandma was the most wonderful woman I have ever met in my life. She provided a home situation that was a supporting and nurturing environment in which to place a 14-year-old girl with emotional problems. As I got to know Judy's grandmother better, we often talked on the phone about her progress and her problems. And during one of these calls, she said, "Miss Snyder, I just don't know what that child does when she leaves the house in the morning. You know that little child in the Peanut comic?" And I said, "Oh, Charlie Brown?" She said, "No, the messy one." I said, "Oh, I know who you mean, the Pigpen." And she said, "Yeah, that's the one. That's what Judy looks like when she comes home from school. I don't know what she does, but it looks like she's been rolling around in a dustbin." It was true. Every day she came nicely dressed, clean and tidy, and by 3 o'clock, you were lucky if you could recognize her. She was always into something. Judy was a 14-year-old girl with the physical appearance of a 20-year-old and the emotional maturity of about a 12-year-old. She arrived at our classroom on the first day very nervous, and she ran into the resource room, which of course was in a trailer out in the parking lot. God forbid it be connected to the actual school. And she always ran in, and from the first day on, she did this. She said, "Miss Snyder, I need a pat." And she would pat my arm because she'd be kind of, fried. And then that was it, and she would settle down. That becomes important later, or I wouldn't have probably put it in here. Back to the story. Kathy and I adored Lucas, as she was fondly called by most of the kids in school. Her outlook of the world made you smile and sometimes just laugh outright, because Judy truly had no filter and just said what she was thinking. You could be walking down feeling great about yourself. She'd go, "Ooh, ugly shoes," and just keep on walking, She would, she was hysterical that way. And most of the time, I mean, she didn't realize she might be upsetting someone. It was just a statement. The shoes, she thought they were ugly, So he'd had Judy in class for about 6 months, and she was certainly improving behaviorally, but she still had a few meltdowns every once in a while. We were lucky to have several teachers who understood Judy and were willing to have her in their regular ed class. Thus, Judy got to know most of the regular ed students in the school, to the joy of some and the consternation of others. One of the students who had taken a liking to Judy was a young man named Chester. Chester was the king of the school, I promise you. He stood close to 6 feet tall, while many of the other male students in middle school were barely 5 feet tall. He looked to be in his early 20s and perhaps a tackle on a high school, if not college, football team. Because of his size, nobody challenged Chester, and thus he could be kind to everyone without losing face, which is important when you're in middle school. You could always tell when Chester was coming down the hall, because he had this certain swagger, And along with him, he was surrounded by a bevy of adoring young girls, and Judy was one of them. And Chester called her Lukey and tolerated Judy's sometimes silly affection. About the end of February, it was announced that we would have a prom, middle school, on a weekend in May. This was a long-standing tradition at the middle school, which Kathy and I thought was ridiculous. First of all, most of our kids came from low-income families, and our experience was that proms cost a lot of money. Secondly, we were concerned that our special needs students were not ready for such a social event. We were wrong on both counts. The prom, we were told, was simply a bit more special dance than the usual ones held in the gym once a month. No fancy clothing required. Tell that to a middle school girl. So being the person who had headed most of the decorating committees for most of my high school proms, I used to love to do that. I jumped in feet first and rounded up a crew of fellow teachers, most of whom were young and single, and looking for a reason to celebrate at a local watering hole after a day of decorating. I was young once. I decided that the theme would be Journey to Brobdingnag, the land of the giants in Gulliver's Travels. Again, this showed my ignorance. A couple of the teachers, a few of the students might have heard about it, but other than that, nobody knew what the heck I was talking about, that Brobdingnag was the land of the giants. Okay. So through the next months, a good thing came from this. We started being sure to teach or talk about this story and have the kids even read pieces of it in English class. And eventually, they really got excited about how cool it would be to feel so small in this land of the giants. We spent weeks after school and on Saturdays collecting loads of dead sumac branches, not the poisonous kind, which we lived on, it was in Benton Harbor, so we could get to the beach easily, and sprayed them with glitter, and then we got pots of sand from the beach to put these 3-foot, 5-foot, and 7-foot flowers that we had made, because we're trying to make the kids feel like, you know, they're in the land of the giants. By the way, the sand was returned to the beach. I'm looking at you, Lori. The sand was returned to the beach after the dance. That aside is for the Creation Justice team. The art classes made 3-foot butterflies out of tissue paper. They were really gorgeous, and I hung them from the ceiling so they kind of, whoops, I knew I was going to do that, flopped around. And then we hung a mirror ball from the center, and so that sparkled off out the glitter and made these shadows on the floor from these giant butterflies. Meanwhile, you need to know this for what happens next with Judy. Meanwhile, back in our classroom, we had surveyed the kids who wanted to come to the prom. Most of our younger mentally impaired kids were not really interested, nor did they have the social skills that would make a prom exciting. But most of our learning disabled students wanted to come, and several of our emotionally impaired students. Guess where Judy stood? Of course, she wanted to come, and she was bound and determined to dance with Chester. So we called Judy's grandmother to see if it was okay with her to attend the dance. She said that was all she had been hearing from Judy. However, Judy wanted a real prom dress. And we assured Judy's grandmother that Kathy had several dresses that she thought would fit Judy, and she would bring them in. So on Friday after school, we had Judy try on the dresses and pick the one she wanted to wear. Now, there were 3 that Kathy brought in. One was, if you can kind of imagine, a Cinderella icy blue dress with little rosebuds that held up these little loops of material. That was my favorite. Then the second one was, I don't want to lose my place on here, it was a mint green bubbled skirted T-length dress, Kathy's favorite. Get ready. And one was this bright lemon yellow one with spaghetti straps and row upon row upon row of yellow net ruffles. Guess which one Judy chose? The yellow one. On the day she was to try on the dresses, Judy kept herself remarkably dust-free, as she knew she would be trying on the prom dresses. And so with tennis shoes on and, I lost my place in here, and her Chicago Bears knee-highs, she tried on the dress, and it was a perfect fit. Her grandmother had agreed to help her find a pair of shoes for the outfit and have her uncle drive her over to school an hour before the dance so we could get her dressed and ready. So the night of the prom, Judy arrived in her sweats, as usual, as we had kept the dress at the room to keep it halfway together and keep it clean and pressed. And here's where the miracle begins. Through the doors of our portable walked the most unbelievable sight. Judy had had her hair done, and her wild and crazy afro had been cut just beautifully, and she had on tiny pearl earrings, and she was carrying a pair of white high heels that any adult woman would not be able to walk in. They were at least 4 inches high. She hands me a note from Grandma to read, and it said, "Sorry about the shoes, but Judy insisted she was going to wear them, and I didn't want to start a row right before the dance." She was such a wise woman. Okay. Kathy took Judy into our bathroom to get dressed while I went into the school to see how things were setting up for the dance. When I returned to our room, I was blown away by what I saw. There stood one of the most beautiful young girls I had ever seen. She looked like a princess, except for the fact that she needed hold on to Kathy because she couldn't walk in the shoes. We didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and so we did a bit of both. And Kathy and I decided that we would help Judy get into the gym, and then she would be on her own, as concerned with walking at least. We couldn't walk around with her all night, you know. We were pretty sure that the shoes would come off anyway because all the kids dance in stocking feet or barefoot at the other dances. And Judy was an absolutely marvelous dancer. I realized, okay, I'm sorry, I skipped a piece here. As we were escorting Judy into the main building via the back door, of course, where the special ed was, I realized that we hadn't talked to her about this tunnel that I had built out of paper mache to make the kids feel like as they walked through it, they would emerge into this land of giants, you know. So Kathy, I said, "Oh my God, Kathy, I didn't tell her anything about the tunnel." And so Kathy left me with Judy to run around to the other entrance to the gym and to be at the end of the tunnel, just in case Judy lost it as she came through. Never fear. At the exact time that our entrance from the back was occurring from the back of the building, Chester was entering at the front door from a limo, dressed in a tomato soup cutaway tux with a top hat and a cane. He looked across at Judy, who was looking beautiful, she really was, and he said, "Lukey, is that you?" And she giggled like she always did, put her hand in front of her, "Yes." And Chester walked up to her and told her she was looking fine. He put out his arm, and she took it, and they started down the tunnel. And here's the rest of the miracle. They walked out of the tunnel exit, and everyone was staring at Chester and Judy. We had talked to the kids about proper behavior at the dance, but I'm sure Chester knew what to do anyway. He walked her to a table, pulled out a chair for her, and went to get her one of our, now remember, Journey to Prom today, giant-sized cookies that we had made, and a glass of punch. We figured that would be it, and that would be enough, and Judy would be thrilled. But I was wrong again. Minus her shoes, Chester went over and escorted Judy out onto the dance floor for the first dance of the night. And of course, now with the shoes off, she's really a great dancer. And the kids are just in awe. They can't believe it. And Judy, of course, was in seventh heaven. Just so you know, on the Monday morning following the prom, Judy arrived at school in her sweats again, with her tennis shoes as usual, and ran up to me for her what I thought was her regular pat-pat. However, it was not due to nervousness this time, but sheer joy, as she and the other kids talked about what had happened at the prom, and they talked with the kids who didn't go. I eventually left this job to pursue my PhD, but Kathy kept me informed of Judy's journey for several years as she moved into high school, and she was really doing well. And I'm now retired, and Kathy is a special ed consultant for an ISD. But whenever Kathy and I meet up, we reminisce about Judy Lucas and the prom dress and the tiny little miracle that remains with us forever. It's just a reminder that sometimes we need to look around us and recognize those tiny miracles. Einstein once said, "There are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is a miracle." I choose the second, and I hope you do too. Namaste.